house the other day in the hallway. You're singing "Oh Happy Day."
One word prayer. Justice, where are you?
And welcome to Justice Serve TV. Michael Bryant here.
Hi, I'm Linda Kenny Bodden here. If I look a little discombobulated, Michael Bryant, it's because just as we're hitting live, I dropped everything. Okay. So just want to let you know. But that's okay.
No more than usual. So that's
I'm
fine.
very organized. You know that.
I know you are.
Anyhow.
You drive me crazy. Today, an interesting take on the Luigi Mangione case. Obviously, I know that's a name nobody remembers. Nobody knows what we're talking about when we mention Luigi Mangione. But we're going to talk about, and obviously he's the man accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in right around the street, right around the corner from where you live, there in Midtown, in
Right,
front of the
block
Hilton.
away.
And so, what I've thought has been this very interesting phenomenon is this tendency to make him somewhat of a hero, not just excuse what he's been accused of doing. Let's make sure we make that very clear. He is innocent. Luigi is innocent until proven guilty.
Until proven guilty, right.
But let's assume whomever did this killing is in that same category, and they were standing up for the rights of the folks who are being abused by the healthcare system. So I'm just fascinated that people can qualify, a crime like this, a murder, and say, well. And as we look at some of the posts, and I just grabbed a bunch of posts. I didn't go looking for specific ones. I just grabbed a few pages that had been posted off of various sites. Almost all of them are positive, or they will say, I don't justify what he did, but I don't think what he did was, correct. But, so there's a qualifier to the condemnation of murder. And I just think that's fascinating. So we also have a mental health expert we're going to talk to as we move through this part of the show. What do we want to start with? Should we start with a little brag just to bring us up to speed on the actual indictment from New York?
Yeah. But can we just have while you're before you do that, while you're speaking about that, I want anyone who's on to Google the words Sacco and Vanzetti, and when we have that discussion, so the people are familiar with that. That just came to me as you're speaking, Michael.
That's what I brought out of you, Sacco and Vanzetti.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll take that. Okay, so as we know, yesterday, Alvin Bragg, DA, Manhattan's finest, he decided to have a presser that had to do with this case, and I'm going to skip some of it. Actually, I'm going to skip most of it, but I think it's important that we just have a little feel for what these charges are, and then we'll get into. We're not going to go deep down the rabbit hole. I think it's more just to give context for the discussion we are having. So.
I'm Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney. I'm honored and privileged to be joined by Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch. First and foremost, I want to extend my deepest...
Okay, blah, 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 blah. Everybody did a great job. We're the best ever. Let me skip ahead here to when he gets to the brass tacks, as I recall from his conversation here.
Exemplary partner and Chief of Detectives...
Oh, still blah, blah, blah. We all are just the best ever. Okay.
Who answered the call when our great commissioner put out the call for their assistance.
Sue says she can't hear. Any way to pull that sound up a little bit?
Let's see if I can. Yeah, it is full blast at the moment. They didn't really give me a beefed up version of it.
In one of the most bustling parts of our city, threatening the safety of local residents and tourists alike, commuters and business people just starting out on their day. Let me say a bit more about the charges. They include 1 count of murder in the first degree as a killing in furtherance of terrorism, 2 counts of murder in the second degree, 1 charging that the killing was done as an act of terrorism, and the second pertaining to the fact that the killing was intentional. The maximum penalty possible for murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism is life without parole. The maximum penalty for murder in the second degree is 25 years to life. There are additional counts as well.
Okay, we well, because it is such a low level, we won't drone on much more with him. But I think it's key that we talk about the terrorism component to both the first degree and the one of the second degree murder charges. So let's talk
Okay,
about that.
but let's charge him with all you want. He's not here in New York. He hasn't waived
Right.
extradition. He's sitting in a prison in Pennsylvania. Hello, I'd like
He's
to
got a
know when,
hearing tomorrow. The hearing's tomorrow,
Right.
which was
Been
interesting. They
moved up.
moved it up. Uh, and so he could, if they could be changing their decision on whether to waive or not. But they're going to have, first of all, they're going to have the prelim on the Pennsylvania charges, which are the fake ID, having a gun, and there was one other one. But they're all very specifically related to what was found in the backpack that day when he was picked up at McDonald's enjoying a hash fried potato. And so that'll be the first part of the proceeding. I don't expect that to be much. But then the second part is going to be the extradition and whether it's waived or whether they're going to have a full-blown discussion about whether or not New York has the jurisdiction they need. I believe New York said they weren't even going to provide the paperwork to Pennsylvania unless they agreed to extradition. So doesn't that kind of hurt the
It's a
argument
little
for extradition?
bit.
think
I don't
it's
know, but I
weird.
assume I'm still waiting for the deal to be made by the defense attorneys to say we'll waive extradition, but we're not going to Rikers. Where are you going to put us? Put us upstate into the Orange County facilities, and where we can be protected, or somewheres like that in New York. And that's what I'm waiting for the attorneys to do. But anyhow, in the meantime, thank you. We know sound was. That the sound was very low, but we tried, we think we'll talk through this. Thank you all for joining us right now. And by the way, Cat Dragon, I am not actually missing an earring. I only wore one specifically because it's very hard to have this earpiece in, which is made to fit my ear, and also the wires down with the earrings. So I try to cover my hair, so a little secret on the right hand with the earpiece and have the left earring showing. But thank you.
I think the secret is to wear a less dangly earring on the non-earpiece ear, so it doesn't out your other ear for not having an earring on it. But what do I know? I got no earrings. Okay. So let's talk about the terrorism issue as it relates to the first count, because I think most people were assuming this was going to be a pretty straight second-degree murder case because New York's weird. They don't really have a more traditional first-degree murder unless you have one of these enhancements. And in this case, the terrorism is the enhancement. But what does that mean?
But the second degree still could be life imprisonment without the enhancement. So it's every state is different. New Jersey, for instance, doesn't have first degree, second degree, third degree. That we do aggravated manslaughter. We can do first degree murder, but every state defines things a little bit differently. So I know people were all up in arms about, well, what do you mean he's not going to be charged with first degree murder? If the penalty is the same as another state's first degree murder, it really doesn't matter. But terrorism, I expected the terrorism charge, actually, Michael, I expected the feds to do it. I'm actually surprised the state did it. What it does is obviously makes him subject to, if he's convicted, to life without parole in prison. But what is terrorism? Well, when you look at the New York statute, it said, a second degree becomes a first degree if it's done with terrorism, right? With there's a terrorism component, and then you have to go to another section of the statute to read the terrorism component. That's just how New York works, right? And it's the definitions section of that statute, which is 490-05, and it said, let me just read this. And I know it's a lot, but for purposes of the other subdivision, okay. Activities that involve a violent act or acts dangerous to human life that are in violation of the criminal laws of the state, that would be, killing somebody, and are intended to, small I, intimidate or coerce a civilian population. So let me read that again. Intimidate or coerce a civilian population, small I2, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, or small number 3, small i's, affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping. So you have to show that Luigi Mangione had one of those intents. Was it to intimidate or coerce a civilian population? Probably the one that applies the most, if any apply. Influence the act of a government by intimidation? I mean, you're really going to get the government to move on healthcare? I mean, we haven't been so successful about that. affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping. I think the same thing that's a problem.
Okay,
I think
so
these
here's my
small
problem. Here's my problem, and here's where I think they've got to stretch, which may be more appropriate for the appellate court or even the legislature. Who's the government in this case? United Healthcare is not a government; it's a totally private entity. So how does that even apply to United Healthcare?
Yeah, I don't think it does. And so there you're left with the small I, the first one, intimidate or coerce a civilian population. So is the civilian population healthcare, you know, executives? Remember, Governor Hochul said and also there was a possibility even in the feds starting a hotline. If you're a CEO, you could call up and say, I feel threatened.
I know.
And you get right to the top of the list
She
of
is
feeling
always
threatened
thinking that
above
woman.
all those battered women that have been threatened for years, you know?
So I think I appreciate, you know, I always appreciate creative use of the statutes. You know, that's the one thing I credited Fonnie Willis and the RICO statute, and it went downhill from there, obviously. But I think unless they find some way to cram United Healthcare into the analysis as some sort of government entity, I don't know how this applies. And I don't know who the group of citizens are that they're trying to coerce by shooting the CEO of a private company. I just don't get it.
I guess it's the CEOs of healthcare. That's the population.
That's the civilian population.
Anyone who makes a decision on our healthcare. I think it's wild. I think it is creative, obviously, and you know, it's going to be really interesting because that's where the whole now defense comes in of intent. What was his intent? Does his manifesto say that he intended to do this to scare everybody, to coerce healthcare, to giving us benefits? Well, you know, that may have been his intent, but I don't think that's going to start them. You know, I know one of my benefits was denied recently. You know, hello, you know, come on. I don't know if that scared them. You know, what can I say?
There's my card. There's my United Healthcare card.
There's United Healthcare. So we both.
They're the biggest. They are, you know, like a government entity in terms of reach and power. They just ain't under the statute. So I could see that being denied, even a directed verdict on that. I could see that at trial, and then it would have to go up on appeal, and maybe the law would have to change. But I get it. Second-degree murder, which is a much cleaner, straightforward approach to this case, still is 25 to life, and it's going to be subject to the judge's discretion. And what judge is not going to give this person life? I'd be shocked. Again,
and that's an easier conviction if you're going to get one. But there's also, you know, obviously there's going to be deals going on. But if you choose to try this case, there is a defense.
A real defense?
Well, yeah, absolutely a real defense because, well, people have said it's insanity. It's not insanity under New York law. Let me tell you that insanity is a legal term. It's not a medical term. You know, there's two distinctions here. It can excuse criminal conduct, right? But the defendant has to not understand the nature of his actions by reason of a mental disease, and the mental disease has to come usually out of what's called the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual used by psychiatrists in the United States. For instance, he believed that he was playing what's one of the hot video games where you shoot at people.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, some first-person shooter game.
Okay, right. Yeah. He believed that he was in the Matrix, and in the Matrix, he was one of these video shooters, so he wasn't really shooting a real person. That's not going to fly here. I mean, you know, he picked a target, he planned, and we don't know what he did over that 6 months he was missing. So then there is a second defense in New York, and it's called EED. It's one that a team of mine successfully used to get a murder charge in Manhattan down to a manslaughter charge where a woman was accused of killing her child. All right. And she's still in jail with a manslaughter. And that was the goal of the defense team. But it really says you have an extreme emotional disturbance, and it's an affirmative defense. That means that the defendant must prove it. It's not an actual defense where the state has to overcome it with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant must prove that they were subject to this extreme emotional disturbance. That's possible here, you know?
Yeah. And you would agree. I mean, that is akin to an insanity type defense. It's a diminishment that
It's a
refutes
diminishment, right?
intent in the intent element of the crime. Because if you
Right.
have those issues, you can't form the requisite intent. You don't have the right mens rea. Then you've defeated that claim. And I do think, you tell me if it's right in New York or not. I know in California you have the alternative of not thinking what
I
you did
thought
was
you
wrong.
dropped out. Your sound dropped out there for a second. So could you just
Am I
repeat
back?
that? You're
Am I
back.
back? Yeah, it's that if what you did you didn't think was wrong, which is a much tougher thing to prove.
That's well.
Yeah, I
you
shot
know.
him, and I can't do that.
Yeah,
It's
but
not,
it wasn't
it's not
wrong by
okay.
what? Because you're emotionally disturbed. The problem you have
Well, yeah, that's
here.
all part. That's a prong in that analysis. Yes.
Says, yeah, the problem you have here, the interesting thing you have here, and that's what we're going to talk about in this show, is this built-in jury pool where you have at least, according to our poll, 28 or was it 29% who believe
It's roughly 3-1 think he's more suspected killer than hero, but that means 1 out of 4 people think more hero than suspected killer.
And that's who's admitting it. That's just who saw the poll. So
yes,
I would suggest that it's a lot higher, and people don't want to say that. So you get someone on the jury who has that belief that he's a hero and that what he was doing was for the good of all of us, along with putting in that extreme emotional defense that he of diminished capacity here because of all the things he's been through, whether it be through healthcare, whether it be through his psychological aspect, whether it be through his physical aspect. And you could easily get a hung jury or an agreement upon a manslaughter, I think.
Yeah.
Or jury nullification, which we'll discuss what that is later on.
Yes, I mean, I think nullification is far more likely in this case than in many. And to that point, now that you've teed this up for us, let me look at. I just went through some different sites and just started kind of looking at different comments about this case and about this defendant. And so I think it's interesting to just start. Just start looking at a few of them, and you get the sense of what I'm talking about here. Just grab a couple of here. Sorry, I couldn't help identify this man. United Healthcare Plan doesn't cover vision. So little humor mixed in with the murder analysis there. Social media seems pretty one-sided to me. They are applauding. This is just somebody's observation. And then, what's this one here? Let me get that one up there for you. The media is pretty much 100% that he's a hero. The media can't accept it, which I found to be kind of an interesting, I don't know, why blaming, I mean, the media may not be disputing it as strongly as they might, but are they the reason for it? Let's see what else. I got a couple others here for you. And I know as those folks go, looking on the various sites, the ones they take part in, the ones they share their own comments, they're seeing the same stuff. It surprises no one that the rich ruling class doesn't think he's a hero, but the working class does. I mean, that's a pretty broad, interesting statement. How about because what we're paying in insurance for people are still educated to the pain, are still subjected to the pain and suffering. The man killed millions of people while his bank account grew, talking about CEO Brian Thompson.
I have seen comments that he is responsible, the decedent here, for more deaths than Osama bin Laden, okay, on social media. I've seen that. That means Brian Thompson, okay? What is jury nullification then you're talking about? That's when the jury members feel that the decedent somehow posed a threat to them, right? In some way. So if you're obviously, one of the questions is going to be, are you insured by United Healthcare? Because then you could have
that's going to be a problem with the jury pool because they're so big,
right? And then if no one's going to admit to that, obviously, but if people get on the jury, they could think, well, you have some animus towards healthcare. I'm going to forgive him because he's brought this whole issue of healthcare denial into the public eye, or or I'll convict them of a lesser crime. I mean, but you won't have that in the federal statute as much as you may have that in New York, where the jury this was happened. So it's interesting because it's brought up all these issues that people are now being educated on. Unfortunately, we still have somebody who's dead. Okay, but that doesn't mean
almost
that
lost in the shuffle.
It's almost lost in the shuffle because of all these other issues, and that does not mean that Mangione won't have a defense, or a defense that he can negotiate some kind of plea agreement on if somebody finds a way to go further against him here. So it's it's even the soon-to-be president weighed in on this the other day and said it was kind of sick that people were calling him a hero.
Well, that's what started me thinking, what am I missing? Am I the oddball that I'm not getting it? Let's just look at a couple more of these before we bring on our mental health professional who can help us try and understand what I apparently can't. Erica says, Luigi killed one CEO. The CEO killed millions. Mantis shrimp, cold-blooded is a heavy phrase. I'd say warm-hearted. Robert Sedano, the vast majority of the public isn't losing any sleep over some dead CEO. And Dragon, toothless, greedy corporations should never be treated as human beings in American law. And this was, again, I didn't just pick and choose these and paste them all together. That's just a screenshot of comments from a various number of different locations. So,
but it's the same type of thing that happened. And I'm going to tell people to Google Sacco and Vanzetti, okay, in the last century in Boston. They were Italian. There was a question of whether they were actually guilty or not, but they were considered heroes at the time they were charged with murder. So things haven't changed. So
it still boggles me. So in an effort to figure out why I don't get it, we have with us a very important mental health professional, Dr. Adam Stein. He's a clinical psychologist. He's going to help us understand a little bit about why people may feel warm and fuzzy about a cold-blooded killer. Adam, thank you for being here, Doctor. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, in broad strokes, what is it that compels people to feel like they support this guy?
Well, I think first of all, from the individual perspective, how our psyches and brains work is our brains are always trying to protect us from harsh realities of the world. So I think we have to start from there, that we're constantly dealing with inner and external conflict and our own powerful drives that are in conflict with one another. And our brains try to make sense of all those things by giving us a rationale. And I think there are a variety of different rationales here. One is that this is an awful tragedy and that there's an individual who, despite having resources and wealth and good looks and Ivy League education, committed this horrible act from a position of desperation. Or you could choose he's a hero. And the defense mechanism is called identifying with the aggressor too, that so that we could feel a lot more comfortable and relieved dealing with that reality than dealing with the loss and grief and trauma and failure of systems and parents and everyone. And there's a lot of terrible things in the world going on to consider in addition to that.
Adam, let me ask you a follow-up on that. We don't know in the 6 months before he shot Mr. Thompson where he was, what he went through, what he underwent, what he read, what his health care was, what his friend's health care was. Does that make a difference in the analysis? Or people, if something came out about his planning or something during that 6 months, would it change people's analysis?
I'd imagine. I'm not sure from a legal perspective. Certainly, as a psychologist, if I'm trying to help someone, all of the history and the circumstances are very, very important in terms of understanding. a person and their motivation and their actions and their emotions. But I'd imagine in terms of the public arena that it could go either way. There could be data that would make people feel even more emboldened to get behind him.
Just to let you know, Adam, you kind of froze, but your voice is still coming through. So we have this wonderful shot of you with your
It's a good
library
still shot.
behind
Yeah.
you. This is a great still shot, but you're frozen. Your feet is frozen.
Okay.
But that's okay. We can still hear you.
Okay.
So what does you see one of Michael's comments, the profiteering falls into this? How do these people vote? Where are they in terms of the political spectrum, or are they not related?
Couldn't really tell you. I think that's best left up to political pundits, or I don't know if this is divided on political lines. I think the thing is, though, there are lots of people who certainly can express displeasure and frustration with the healthcare system, but I think the question we're asking is it okay to rationalize this, or why do people seem to be rationalizing an act of violence against another human being?
And so I had a thought, just terms of this large number. It's not like a stray person here and there. There's a large number. So is there some comfort in knowing other people feel the same way that you do? Is it some sort of reinforcement of what the individual thinks because the masses think the same?
Absolutely. I think we've seen it in other circumstances where the collective impression and then amplification in the media can definitely influence. I mean, that's sort of what advertising is all about.
How about this? Wait, I have a sexist question.
No, go ahead.
First.
Okay.
My sexist question. Is it true there are women? First, they think he's very attractive. You read that all over the place. Do they think they can fix this guy? Is he the ultimate bad boy that women might be attracted to?
In terms of
Great.
picking a jury. In terms of picking a jury, would you select women who might be more sympathetic to him? Is that what your question is, Linda?
Well, yeah. I mean, mine was broader, but you can apply it to the jury selection process. Mine was just sociologically. Is that a thing?
Well, I am a psychologist. I'm not a sociologist. I think there are definitely examples from even recent history where people have taken a sympathetic stance towards individuals, particularly men who are deemed to be attractive and suave. Robert Chambers is one example, the Central Park Strangler, where
Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy would fall into that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was a serial.
I'm not aware of the Ted Bundy fan club, but they
were out there.
They were, and then he represented himself. So yeah.
I think from a more general perspective, in America, we have a history of glorifying violence against in the service of injustice, starting from the founding of our nation, right? It's in our DNA. And there are many, and prior to that, I mean, there's the legend of Robin Hood. He steals from the rich. He definitely he was armed. I don't think he, took kindly to his foes.
He did kill, and I think in the original book, he did kill people.
Sopranos are very glorified as one of the most popular television shows of all time. So human beings are violent, and there's lots of ways to rationalize our use of violence and our consumption of violence.
So it's not women, or it's across the thing. It doesn't necessarily mean women. Michael's question was to women, but it could someone
right. I was basically dodging that question because I didn't want to indulge a potentially biased perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you hear that, Michael Bryant?
I didn't. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I think his audio went out there for
Mhm.
just a second. Hey, you bring up an interesting point though about the folks that might follow, the followers that may feel more comfortable. Do you think people are desensitized now? You mentioned The Sopranos, obviously mob.
Right.
Are people just so
right.
desensitized that when they see it in real life, it's, hey, what's the big deal?
Right. Well, if you think about our response to the latest mass shooting, which was just yesterday, compared to Sandy Hook, for instance, that the way we interact with tragic violence has definitely changed over time, and the way we react to its delivery in the media. So I would say yes. I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is seems like the data that seem to be analyzing comes from social media too. That's not the exact same thing as reality. So, and I think
That's for sure. Yeah.
people may express themselves differently in person. I think they can feel more disinhibited to express some views and ideas in social media, but maybe that I don't know if that represents their true beliefs.
Thank you, Jerome Street, by the way. You guys always trigger my brain with law. You guys are great together. Justice served. Thank you very much for watching
Jerome.
us, and really, really appreciate that. Cat Dragon says his manifesto may have had a healthcare emphasis. Let me ask you this about it came out in the press conference that what had been reported about delay, deny, depose was sort of correct, approximately correct. The deny and depose were on the cartridges found on the scene, but on a bullet found on the scene, not a cartridge. And Bragg made in the press release that occurred, that everyone get online. Delay was on a bullet that was found at the scene. Now, Michael Bryant, you can explain the difference between a bullet and a cartridge, right?
Yeah, I don't have any here handy, as I normally would. But yeah, the cartridge is what holds the explosive material. The bullet is the item at the end that enters the object, the body, or doesn't. In this case, was that a spent bullet or was it an unfired?
It didn't say. It may have been the fired bullet. Remember, he fired 3 shots and only 2 hit the victim.
2 hit him, yeah.
So
that bullet would be
that
pretty
was the
strong
fired.
to maintain. And it was written on the bullet itself. That'd be
says
interesting.
on the press conference, release, the release says, the press release says that the cartridges had a deny and depose, and a bullet found at the scene, and the bullet had delay found at the scene. So I
Here's my
wanted to ask the
theory.
doctor. Go ahead, Michael.
Let me give you my practical theory here. Remember the gun jammed and he had to kind of clear it? It could be that an unspent bullet and cartridge was ejected at that point, and then they would have found it. Because I just can't imagine a bullet having been fired to be in the condition that you could read anything on it, as you can with the casings. So just a theory. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But why would somebody write on cartridges and then a bullet? These 3 words that have become this manifesto. So is there a meaning that you could see for that a bullet would have delay and then the cartridges on the top would have deny and depose? Any psychological meaning, or is it just that's what was easy for him to do?
I'm what's coming to mind, but you all can correct me, but I feel like there is a phrase, "I have a bullet with your name on it." Like,
oh yes, you're right.
Right. So I think that is that is a type of a message. There's a precedent for that type of communication in lore. I don't know where it comes from. If it comes from the tales of the Old West, or but I think that there's a specific aggressive act there, and it's very targeted and symbolic.
Yeah,
and we don't know from the medical examiner yet. 2 bullets had to be taken, spent bullets, Michael Bryant, I think, out of his body, obviously, that hit him. We don't know if there's anything on those bullets that are taken out of his body. What kind of evidence is on that? Maybe there's 2 other words. Maybe there's 2 more words.
We do know there was that book that challenged the healthcare industry that had 2 of those 3 words as the title. And so there's some belief that he may have co-opted that and wrote that. I mean, no matter how you look at it, Dr. Stein, that's pretty deliberate. That's really well thought out. You're sending a message that you know will be received after the fact.
No, you're right. It seems like I'm not a legal professional, but the term premeditated comes to mind in terms of forethought. And I mean, it seems like there was a lot of planning involved in the act. We definitely don't know what the individual's state of mind was and what the other factors are that were influencing him. So, or there are some, but not very many.
And we don't know. Again, I go back to the 6 month. There's a lot we don't know about that. I assume the police have some indication about. But how then is all this? I come to you, for instance, and I want you to tell me, I'm the defense attorney, and I want you to give me his state of mind. Give me what may be his emotional disturbance. What do you see? And I'm not having diagnosed him, but what do you see generally by reading the papers and reading and listening to the press conference about what his state of mind could be?
It seems like there was a degree of suffering involved. There's some indication or some telling of his having some kind of chronic back issue and possibly having a surgery, or and so there seems to be also a period of time where his communications stopped or were disrupted with his support system. So it seems like something happened, and he was clearly in a tremendous amount of distress. I don't really know anything. We don't know about his mental health history prior to that, if there were pre-existing conditions or Michael?
Yeah, my thought was, I get your take on this. If somebody presents to you as somebody that has kind of dropped out, as it were, and his friends are saying, "Hey, we haven't seen the guy for months. He's one day he's here, and then we just can't find him." I mean, what leads to that kind of falling off the grid socially?
Yeah, that's there could be a number of reasons. I mean, when you're doing a thorough evaluation of an individual, you definitely need a lot more information to be able to make a determination. And seems like we have a sparsity of information that would help answer some of these questions. So it's really hard to say. It could be, it could be, we don't know. I don't know exactly what he was being treated for medically, if he was receiving any kind of psychiatric or pain medication. So that there are a number of pain can influence your emotions and your behavior in an extreme way. And certainly medications can too. And we know certain medications for pain are addictive. So this would be my thought process, and trying to, what is the additional information I would need to make a determination, and also, but what's the additional information I would need to make a determination, and then what are the kinds of things that typically lead to these kinds of behaviors? Could it be a mental illness that was unfolding all along? Because I forgot exactly how old he is.
26. He's at the schizophrenic age, I think, right? He's
at the cutoff. Usually, at past 26 or so, people are less likely to have a first psychotic episode, but people in young adulthood definitely could. That's the age range, in the early 20s. So that's possible.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, that is whether he could
have any other trauma that we're not aware of that could be triggering.
Well, the law says, for my defense, if they came to me to represent, which they didn't, okay, the defendant acted under influence of extreme emotional disturbance from which there was a reasonable explanation or excuse the reasonableness of which is to be determined from the viewpoint of the person in the defendant's situation under the circumstances as the defendant believed them to be. So for my affirmative defense, I have to show that his emotional disturbance caused this belief that he had that may have not been reasonable, but was reasonable to him under his circumstances to excuse him
Right.
of the intent.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the sort of that would speak to the need for like an extensive psychiatric evaluation and interview to determine that. Because I think the fine line is, or the determination needs to be made, is this someone who is just enraged and acting rationally, and even though they committed an irrational act, or were they under the influence of some kind of corrupted brain process?
Yeah, that's interesting, Linda, that it's a subjective standard, and it's not even that waffling subjective standard, the one that sounds like subjective, but it's not, when it says, would a reasonable person in that person's position act a certain way? No, would the subject act in this way? Which is actually an easier defense if it's not the reasonable person standard. If it's that subjective person, it's a much easier defense. Doctor, let me ask you this. If have you seen in your practice a physical injury, and we believe that there was some pretty serious back surgery. We've seen the x-rays, which we believe were Mr. Mangione's. That's not proven yet, but like 3 screws in the L5S1 area, which is a very it's an area near and dear to my heart, but lower, and so I'm very familiar with that pain and problem. Have you seen pain, extreme pain, continued pain, chronic pain manifest itself in mental disturbance?
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a possibility. Personally, I can't recall a specific patient circumstance where I dealt with that, but I have had personal experience with people who have had chronic pain, and then pain medicines cause tremendous psychiatric problems and behavioral problems for them, including violence and death.
Now, he targeted, obviously, Mr. Thompson. He knew where he was going to be. He knew it was coming out. I mean, I think that he must have known, must have, my impression would be that there's somebody else that may not have been involved with the crime, but tipped him off as to where Thompson was going to be, whatever, even innocently. But the fact that he chose him specifically, what does that tell you, if anything, as a psychologist? Does it help? If, let's say, the prosecution came to you, how would you say it helped them, or the defense came to you? And I don't know the answer. I don't know which way it spins, which way it should be. But the fact that he targeted this particular man, how he got there.
It's a great question. I'm not sure how to address that. I'd really need to understand more about the relationship and the process that was involved in getting there. I don't know if there are records of his internet searches, or really the preoccupation with this particular individual. Maybe, like as Michael was referencing, that United Healthcare is one of the biggest, if not the biggest. Do we know if he was a consumer of United Healthcare himself?
Yeah, I don't think it's been proven. I think it's assumed, but I don't think it's been proven.
I think
somebody said it's not, but we don't know that. It's not, the prosecution hasn't said it one way or another. Yeah,
it is a fascinating question in terms of what motivated him to target this particular individual, and it does feel like it's hard to connect all the threads. And I wish I had more to add.
That's an interesting point, though, and I think it makes the defense harder if he is not a United Healthcare patient, insured, because then he's acting out of the goodness of his heart on behalf of those who are United Healthcare members. I just think it's a tougher sell. I don't think the other one is easy.
Michael, it may make the jury selection easier, right?
Well, if he's not I don't know. I don't know. That would make a difference. You still got United
Well,
Healthcare front and center.
Yeah, but Dr. Science is thinking about that. We have a great tradition in this country of yaying violence in name of social justice. And wouldn't that make, therefore, then the jury selection, you could have anybody, even if they're not United Healthcare consumers or not? And I'm searching for answers. I'm saying, if I'm the defense attorney, I'm coming to both of you, and I want answers to these questions if I'm going to have an ED defense.
I think if you're asking jurors if they are UHC members, that's not going to end the discussion, because if you say yes, it's not like you're going to be kicked off the jury. You got to have more. You're going to have to dig into it. Did you ever have problems? Were there bills that weren't paid? Did you get consultations that said you needed X and they wouldn't pay for it? But there are going to be plenty of folks who have those stories. Plenty of folks, and I can't believe that a jury will be totally sanitized from those kind of folks. I just can't believe it. Or if they are, they're going to have relatives. I think getting a clean jury on that issue is going to be difficult.
What about, next question. So the next question is, we've all seen the videotape. If you go online now, you don't really see the shooting itself, but you see the shots being fired. But there was a person standing right there at the Hilton where I walked by. And by the way, for our members and also on our site, we have a number of videos of the site, since it's a block here from my office and all. Standing there having morning coffee. I don't know if it was a cigarette too. And he doesn't shoot this witness. He doesn't kill the witness. There was a person in a car, in an SUV, waiting obviously to pick up a client at the Hilton. He doesn't shoot that person. He just, does what he's there to do in his mind, and then jogs across the street and leaves. How does that either help in terms of analysis of his mind, doctor, one way or another?
Great question. It is interesting. I think you could say that there's a degree of judgment being he's operating under certain principles. It's not just a reckless act. Perhaps he was only targeting this target and wasn't really thinking about eliminating a trail of evidence, or maybe he had a sense of compassion or a moral code about senseless violence, and this was justified. I'd imagine that could be a distinction.
Well, let me ask our listeners right now. We have a lot of Brooklyn and has said, and Kristen Vasquez has said that they've had back pain. They didn't go out and kill somebody. All of you weigh in, who's watching right now, about whether or not you would, though, credit any extreme emotional disturbance defense. Would you just reject it from what you've seen offhand, or would you credit it? All of our, I'd like to hear you put up your comments, and we're safe, by the way. We're not gonna like harass you one way or another. If you say you would, you wouldn't. What do you think as we discuss Luigi Mangione and whether or not with this charge of terrorism that he's been indicted for, whether or not you credit what could be the only defense he could have, which is this emotional disturbance? What do you all think?
We know from our poll.
Before you move to the viewers' comments, I just wanted to let you know I'm running out of time.
Okay.
All right. No, I think what you say is, well, it looks like our time is up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Is that how it works?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, but you're so great. You're so great. Yeah, thank you.
Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun.
And we'll try and, suss this out as we continue to unfold this case. So thanks for the input. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Stein.
So, so I was going to say that our poll makes it sound like at least 1 out of 4 people that have contributed to the Justice Serve universe have felt like he's more hero than suspected killer. It'd be great if somebody would step up and explain that. I just want to know what the mindset is. It's fascinating.
I'd love to have people on. I'd love to have people on who feel that way, because that's the jurors you're looking for, to not necessarily excuse his behavior totally, but to understand his behavior I guess is the word. And I guess we'll learn more about why he targeted them. I know there was a healthcare conference, but he had to target this guy. He knew who this guy was.
And that's why it makes so much more sense. Again, we don't know who his provider was. Was there a family member that was getting, the short shrift, and they were the United Healthcare member? I don't know. It just makes more sense to me. I mean, I'm even more confused, and I get confused easily, but I'm even more confused if I'm Blue Cross Blue Shield. I mean,
I'm interested in your statement at the beginning, Michael. You said it's the biggest insurer. I did not know till this that they have the highest denial rate. It's something like 23% denial rate, and that most of that denial rate is because of artificial intelligence looking at the claims, not some doctor, not even some healthcare practitioner, just artificial intelligence, and then denying, and a huge denial rate. And so that was news to me. I was shocked learning about that. Well, it's two separate things, whether you excuse a homicide or not, but I was absolutely shocked.
And having been a healthcare member with both UHC a much longer period of time, but Blue Cross Blue Shield, Affirm, I think, was one of them. That obviously Anthem is one, which I think is connected with Blue Cross Blue Shield. I've never had any outrageous, luckily, knock on some wood here, denials or fights. Certainly disagreements with them that I've had to, suggest they do something different than what they're doing. But never to the point that I felt like, my life is threatened or my family members' lives are threatened because they can't get the care that they need. I think it's extreme. Maybe I've just been lucky.
Well, it's something funny you mentioned Anthem, because you are in Connecticut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that I want to dime out where you live, but everyone knows that. We've talked about that. I'm in New York. But just before or the day of the shooting where Mr. Thompson lost his life due to homicidal violence, Anthem announced that they weren't going to cover claims in New York or Connecticut for anesthesiologists in an operating room if it went over a certain period of time that they have set for that specific procedure. So if you go in to have your hip replaced, here, we're going to cover anesthesia for this amount. We're not going to cover the cost for about that. Well, it was kind of a tone deaf time to announce it, but interestingly enough, like within a few days, that was walked back pretty quickly when all the stuff came out about health. So, maybe this has had some effect, despite the fact that this is violence that caused it. And that's the juror that I'm looking for.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because as we know, memories are short. And as this gets further away from the event, the attitudes that are so strong now are going to soften, and there's going to be a melding, and there's going to be less demarcation between those that feel as he did, allegedly, and those who feel like, they're a corporation, but I'm not going to kill anybody over it. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out over time, because I think the time is going to be critical. And if they get back here, let's say the first of the year, is there going to be a trial before the summer? No. Right?
No.
What's your guess?
No, and you got the feds.
End of the year
involved too.
Well, that's another
trial. That's another thing. We got the federal government's going to come in. I think they're going to come in with another terrorism. I don't think they're going to trust.
And they're just going to take the case. They're going to swoop in and take the case. You think?
Well, I don't know if they can swoop in and take it, but as we see in other jurisdictions,
convince
other jurisdictions that it's always behind there. It's back there, and it's not double jeopardy. Right. And they don't have a murder statute, but they do have a terrorism statute. So we've seen other cases involving violence on young Black men where the civil rights statutes come in. Right. Even though the feds don't necessarily have a murder statute, except for certain people that are killed, like governmental officers and all. At Oklahoma City, for instance, that was pretty bad. But I don't think they'll swoop, but I think they'll be swoop-like. Right. They're going to be overlords here. So that's you're never going to have a trial on this before the summertime. Never in a million years.
If there is one. I mean, who knows?
If there's one, right? If there is one, right? At all. It kind of depends, doesn't it? On the deal, kind of depends on. He's got private attorneys, whether or not they're being funded. GoFundMe's not funding it, but there is another site that is funding it.
There is.
He's got a family
I made a note of it somewhere here. It's called Give, Send, Go.
Yeah,
and they're up to about $40,000 right now.
Right. He's got a family that apparently is very wealthy. Supposedly, there's a trust fund that he may get assets to, but then he may not because he was arrested for a felony. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff as to what kind of legal advice and how much of a legal case that he will mount, depending on his finances. And that's the underbelly of the criminal defense world, no matter what, you know.
Yep. It is very much influenced by money. They can't get you. You know, you're not going to be doing that pro bono. You know, you'd be very pricey, and you know, your team, that would not come cheap. So
no, it's including the psychologists and psychiatrists and the workup that Dr. Stein talked about. You have to do that. And it's harder to do it in jail when the client's in jail, but you have to do that. And then the prosecution's going to want to do it. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so. You know, but then of course the defendant doesn't take the stand, so you don't really use it. You may not use it. And you have to get the emotional disturbance in another way. It's all very complicated, but I'm sure his lawyers will figure out a way to best represent him, because right now he is presumed innocent, no matter how horrible the crime is, no matter what we saw with our own eyes.
So that somebody did that. Yeah. All right then. Have we exhausted our analysis of why people would think he's at least somewhat a hero? I think so. We may return to this at some point, dig into it again as we learn more, because as Dr. Stein said, you know, once we learn more about that background, especially that dead zone, you know, that 6 to 9 months where he just kind of dropped out, you know, something's going on. Something is happening. Whether it was some sort of self-radicalization, you know, something to cause this guy to lose it, allegedly. All right. Okay. So what's happening the rest of this week? Can we lay that out? I know he's got this the hearing tomorrow, which we may or may not chime in on tomorrow night. We'll probably just wait till some of the dust settles, unless something amazing happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. So with this hearing, you know, again, it wouldn't surprise me that there was a deal at some point that he comes back and he waives going to Rikers, but he waives extradition, but he comes back and he's put someplace else, because I don't think New York really wants him in Rikers anyhow. They can't protect him in Rikers. It's no way to protect him in Rikers.
Nope.
We all just came through the YSL trial. By the way, is the innocent defendant in YSL still in jail? The one who got the not guilty in all the counts across the
and I've heard that the mystery warrant may be really mysterious, like doesn't even exist. So,
doesn't even exist. All right. So, you know, when we talk about the criminal justice system, we got a lot to speak about. But anyhow, yes, we do have a common show that will come on. It won't be live, but it'll be on Friday. I think at 6 o'clock we'll be doing it. Okay,
I'll make a note of that. We'll do 6 o'clock. Yeah, and you know, this is why we love you guys giving your feedback, because we react to it. You know, if you have suggestions that make sense, great. Let's do it. And it also
throw Michael Bryan a little love too. He does all the clips for the show.
Yeah. I'm in the back washing the dishes. That's, you know, don't worry about that. I'll just make sure that, you know, the plates are clean when you serve things up. But yeah, so it gives us a chance to kind of you know, get your feedback, which is great, and you know, good, bad, or otherwise, we dig into it.
Yep. So, Michael Bryan, you have something to tell our viewers.
Oh, you mean that thing? Like I say, in the meantime, I'm Michael Bryant. Try to do the right thing.
And I'm Linda Kenny Bodden, and together Michael and I are Just to Serve TV. And if you like us, please hit that subscribe, like, share, and notify button, and we'll see you next time.